In our last video, we answered the question, what does God say about the role of women in the church? And in short, we just emphasized how vital that role is. And then we went on to the second part of the question. Furthermore, the question asks, is it biblical to have women serve as pastors or teachers? And if so, why or why not? 1 Timothy 2:12, as we said last time, does not permit a woman to take on a pastoral or elder role as teacher or having authority in that sense. And the question we really want to wrestle with today, as we pick up on that last question, part of the question, is why. It certainly is not because women are less spiritual or less discerning or less gifted or less intelligent, because anybody who looks around at our church, for example, would quickly have to dispel that notion, because obviously many women are far more gifted, spiritual, discerning, intelligent than our men. So this is not about that kind of competence, and unfortunately the conversation typically goes that way today when people are talking about roles. It's almost taken on an equal, for there to be equality, there has to be the same. And if there are fewer women doing a particular task, then therefore sexism is the only explanation for that. Which I believe is very unfortunate, especially for women, because the standard becomes for women to truly be women, they need to be just like men, which to me seems like a demotion, not a promotion. But I understand that what I just said could be used to justify trying to keep women in their place, which is not what I'm saying at all. But the real answer to the question, why, is God's creation design, God's design. And that the text in 1 Timothy 2 makes that clear. In verse 12, he lays out the command. Verse 13, he says, for Adam was formed first, then Eve. Now, again, every one of these statements can be misunderstood, because the point there is not you snooze, you lose, or finders, keepers, losers, weepers. Adam was there first, so therefore he gets. That's not it. Again, it's a design. It's a creation design statement. The sexes, male and female, are not the result of some kind of social construct or even personal competence. That's not what they're about. It's God designed Adam, and then to fill Adam's incompleteness and make a whole, God designed Eve. I mean, he could have easily, if he was truly egalitarian in an absolute or extreme sense, he could have just replicated Adam. Like, why didn't he just stick Adam in a 3D printer and clone him or just replicate it? Lots of atoms. It seems like it would have been easier. Easier to reproduce, easier to get along. But there was clearly a creation design, creating Adam, and then out of Adam, creating Eve. The two are not interchangeable. And the biggest point we get from that, the biggest answer to the question why, is God is glorified. Just as Jesus is assumed a different role than his Father, yet is absolutely equal. So just as the Spirit assumed a different role than Jesus, yet is absolutely equal. We image God, we reflect God, we glorify God in some way through our diversity, which we do not when we try to strip all distinctions away. The second thing that Paul goes on to say there, and we're still kind of in 1 Timothy 2, is the idea of protection or safety. So there is a glorifying God answer to the question, and then there also is a good of us. Like, this is for our good, our safety, our security, our protection answer. And the way he explains that, he says Eve was deceived. And the point there is not that Eve is more gullible, or that, women are always more gullible than men. That's not, to me, that doesn't seem to be the point. It's Eve was vulnerable when she rejected God's creative design. And then he goes on to contrast that in verse 15 with, yet she shall be saved through childbearing. Again, another uber controversial statement, and this is why smart people stay away from this verse. Just kidding. But the point there is not, women will go to heaven if they have lots of babies, or what some people do with that verse is interpret it allegorically, like the saved through childbearing is referring to Jesus. The woman had a child that saved the world. I think there are far more clear, simpler interpretations, and that is simply the word saved is to be safe. Like, that word can be used very generally. Women are in a really safe place when they, and he uses the statement childbearing, which is parallels Genesis 3:15, referring to the curse. So the very means of the curse, the pain that comes from the curse in childbearing, can actually become a conduit of safety and security. And if you draw a parallel there between 1 Corinthians 3:15, where that phrase saved through is used, same one, not as by means of childbearing, but in spite of. So in spite of the very thing that you might think is hindering you, hurting you, keeping you from all that God could do through you, that very thing in God's design can be a means of safety and security. So again, the point is not every woman is going to get married and have babies. The point is all about God's creative design. He is glorified. He has designed us to fulfill His calling. And when we walk in that, there is great security and joy, not just for us, but for future generations and for the community and family as a whole.